She cleaned his house for $50, until she saw his daughter crying and everything changed. The ad was 3 lines long, no photo, just a number and a dollar amount, $50 cash, one-time job, bring your own supplies. Nadia almost didn't call. She was sitting in the parking lot of a pharmacy she could no longer afford to enter, the engine off because the AC cost gas, scrolling through a job board on her phone that kept loading the same 5 listings she'd already applied to twice. Outside, July was doing what July does in a city that never gets enough rain, burning everything slowly, without smoke. She had $11 in her checking account. She had a daughter of her own, 6 years old, asleep at her sister's place in a studio apartment 2 miles east. She had a certificate in medical coding that had not in 2 years translated into a single full-time offer. She had a car that needed an oil change and 2 back tires that had been living on borrowed time since April. She had, in other words, the particular arithmetic of a woman who had run the numbers too many times and kept arriving at the same answer. She called the number. He answered on the 4th ring. His voice was the kind of flat that happens when a person has spent so long not talking to anyone that their voice has forgotten how to warm itself. Not cold exactly, not unfriendly, just stripped of the reflexive warmth that most people maintain as social habit. He said his name was Daniel Reeves. He said the house was in Maplewood, off Route 9, the Cape Cod near the elementary school. He said it needed a full clean kitchen, bathrooms, floors, all the surfaces, a general pass through every room. He said he'd pay $50 in cash at the end, and he needed it done by Saturday because his mother-in-law was coming to stay for a week, and she had opinions about the state of things. He said that last part with a flat exhaustion that wasn't quite humor, but was in the neighborhood of it. The tone of a man who was too tired for resentment, but still aware of the absurdity of the situation. Nadia wrote down the address on the back of a pharmacy receipt, the same receipt she'd been staring at for 20 minutes, the one that listed the blood pressure medication she was picking up for her sister and the small copay that had eaten the last of her float. She told him she'd be there Friday at 9. She hung up, sat another moment in the parking lot, and then started the car, pulled into traffic, and told herself this was just one job, one house, $50, and then back to the real search. She had no idea yet that sometimes the door that looks most like a dead end is the only door that actually opens. The house on Maplewood was a Cape Cod that had been handsome once and recently hadn't been tended with the attention it deserved. Cream-painted shutters, a porch with 2 wooden chairs, a flower bed along the front walk that had gone from cultivated to feral. The kind of garden that someone had started with genuine intention and then lost the will to continue in the specific way that grief takes intention away from you, quietly and completely, in areas you don't even notice until much later. Nadia parked at the curb, checked the address twice against the pharmacy receipt, gathered her caddy of supplies and a tote bag heavy with extra rags and a second pair of gloves, and walked up the path. The door opened before she knocked. The man standing in the frame was tall, mid-30s, with the physical residue of someone who had once been comfortable in his own body, and was now just living in it as a necessity. Dark circles so permanent they'd stopped being circles and become just the topography of his face. His jaw was unshaved in that random, patchy way of a man who shaves occasionally when the occasion surfaces itself from the deep water of distraction. He was wearing a gray t-shirt with a small stain on the collar that he either hadn't noticed or had quietly decided not to notice. His posture was the posture of a person bearing weight they've stopped trying to set down. He looked at her for a beat too long, not rudely, just with the glazed expression of someone who had briefly forgotten that other people existed in the world and was recalibrating. "You're Nadia," he said. "I am." "Daniel," he stepped back from the door. "Come in." The inside of the house landed in her chest like a weight. It wasn't filthy in the way that neglect is sometimes filthy, no mold, no garbage piled in corners, no smell of rot or accumulated mess. It was messier than that in a way. It was the mess of a person who had kept going through grief by simply not stopping, who had continued to exist in a space that had slowly accumulated the evidence of existing without living. Dishes in the sink, not many, but the same 2 plates and 1 mug sitting there in the particular way that suggests they've been sitting for days. Mail opened and left precisely where it landed, on the counter, on the small table by the door, on the arm of the sofa. A jacket dropped over the banister at the bottom of the stairs. 2 pairs of shoes by the door, 1 large, 1 very small, pink and Velcro strapped, left in that half-kicked-off posture that children's shoes always take on, like the child had been in a hurry to go somewhere and hadn't come back yet. A sippy cup on the kitchen counter, empty, rinsed but not put away. That was the shape of it, things that hadn't been put away. Not abandoned, rinsed, opened, set down, but left in that intermediate state between use and return, the state of a house where someone's attention had been interrupted and never quite resumed. Nadia set her caddy on the kitchen floor and turned to ask Daniel where he wanted her to start, and that was when she heard it. From upstairs. A sound, small and rhythmic, like breathing that had caught on something, the specific, unmistakable texture of a child trying not to cry out loud. The practiced, effortful sound of small lungs learning containment too young. She looked at Daniel. He had his back to her, was pulling his jacket off a hook by the door. "I have to take a call for work," he said, already looking at his phone. "It's been scheduled for a week, I can't move it. I'll be in the study down the hall, I'll keep the door closed. Just do whatever needs doing, you'll find your way around. There's cleaner under the kitchen sink if you need it." He walked down the hall without looking up. A door closed. The house settled back into silence, and then from upstairs, just at the edge of hearing, the sound again. Nadia stood in the kitchen for a long moment. She thought about the $50. She thought about the kitchen, which was going to take a while. She thought about her sister's apartment and June's face in the morning, and the 2 tires on her car and the oil change. Then she set down her tote bag, walked to the stairs and went up. The girl was sitting on the floor of a bedroom that had been decorated for a slightly younger child, pale yellow walls, those glow-in-the-dark stars arranged on the ceiling that would light up in green constellations after dark, a bookshelf that held board books at the bottom and chapter books at the top, and a thin layer of dust across all of them. A hand-painted name on the wall above the headboard, Lily, in lavender letters with small flowers. A pile of stuffed animals that had clearly been arranged and rearranged many times, each in a different configuration, suggesting a child who spent a lot of time in this room reorganizing the things within reach. Lily was maybe 7. She had her knees pulled up to her chest and her face pressed into the collar of a shirt that had a unicorn printed on it, and her shoulders moved in those small, hitching waves that children's shoulders make when they've been crying alone long enough to go quiet about it. The post-sob breathing, the aftermath of something that started loud and taught itself to be small. She didn't look up when Nadia appeared in the doorway. Nadia stood in the frame for a moment. She understood about doors, about the difference between entering a space and standing in its threshold. She thought about going back downstairs. She weighed the math of it, the $50, the kitchen, the bathroom, the floors, the work she'd come to do. She thought about the sound she'd heard from the kitchen. She sat down on the floor. Not next to the girl, that would have been too much, too sudden, the adult presumption of welcome that children rightly distrust. Just in the doorway itself, cross-legged, her back against the frame. She didn't say anything. She simply became present. The room was quiet. Distantly she could hear Daniel's voice from behind the study door downstairs, controlled, professional, the different creature he became on work calls. After a while the girl looked up. Her eyes were her father's in shape and color, same dark brown, same slightly sunken quality. But where his were closed down and managing, hers were open and watchful and very, very tired in the way that children's eyes get tired when they've been processing more than they can name. She had a smear of something orange on her left cheek, paint, or a Cheeto, or both. Her hair had been put in pigtails at some point earlier and had significantly departed from those pigtails. She looked at Nadia with the direct, absolutely unsentimental assessment that children reserve for adults they haven't been instructed to trust. The assessment that takes maybe 4 seconds and determines everything. "Are you the cleaning lady?" she said. "I am." "My dad hired you." "But he did, $50. The girl seemed to consider whether this was a respectable transaction. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, the decisive, finished gesture of a child moving on from something. "My grandma is coming and Dad got stressed," she said. "He always cleans before Grandma Patricia comes, but this time he forgot until it was too late." "That makes sense," Nadia said. "He forgets a lot of things now." She said it without blame, just observation. "Since my mom died." Nadia kept her face steady. "Yeah." "Nina," the girl said, saying the name the way you say a word you need to practice, the way you test a sore place with your tongue. "Nina Reeves. She was a designer, she made websites. She was very funny." A pause. "She used to make funny voices when she read to me." "What happened to her?" Nadia asked. She asked it straight, the way you talk to children when you're respecting their intelligence, not around the thing but directly at it. "Heart," Lily said. "Something was wrong with her heart that nobody knew about. She was 34. She looked at her knees. It was in January, Daddy found her." January, 7 months ago. Nadia did the quiet calculation of what 7 months was in grief time, not long. Not anywhere near long enough. Still raw enough that the house showed it, that a man's voice had the particular flatness of someone still in early days, that a child sat on floors and cried in careful silence. "I'm sorry about your mom," Nadia said. Lily looked at her for a long moment, really looked, the full 4-second assessment, the revised version now that they'd been talking. Then she held out a book that had been pressed against the wall beside her. She'd been holding it the whole time, Nadia realized, pressed between her knee and the baseboard. It had a horse on the cover, a gray horse in full gallop across a green field, bold block letters, BRAMBLEWOD. "Do you know how to read out loud?" Lily asked. Nadia looked at the book. She looked at the girl. She thought about the kitchen downstairs and the $50 and every single reason she had come here. She thought about her own daughter, June, and the 6 months after her father left, when June had gone quiet in the same particular way, fine on the surface, technically fine, working so hard at fine that you could hear the effort. She took the book. "I do," she said. "Where were you?" She read for 25 minutes. Lily migrated from the floor to the bed, tucked against the headboard with a stuffed elephant named. She informed Nadia, Gerald, held loosely in one arm the way children hold things when they're being older than they feel. The horse in the book was named Windmere and had strong opinions about jumping fences, and Lily had strong opinions about Windmere's decisions. And twice she interrupted to explain what she thought Windmere should have done differently, and both times she was right. When Nadia closed the book at the end of a chapter, Lily was not quite asleep, but was in that territory right next to it. The slow-blinking, heavy-limbed state of a child whose body has finally allowed itself to rest. "Will you come back?" Lily asked. Her voice had that soft, slightly slurred quality of the edge of sleep. "I don't know," Nadia said truthfully. She believed in being honest with children about the things that were uncertain. Lily blinked slowly. She seemed to be considering something. "Dad needs help," she said. "He doesn't know it, but he does. He thinks if he works enough then he doesn't have to be sad." She delivered this with the matter-of-fact authority of someone who has spent considerable time observing the behavior in question. "But it doesn't work like that. Sad waits." "Sad does wait," Nadia agreed. "My counselor says I should talk about it, about Mom." Lily pulled Gerald a little closer. I talk about it with her sometimes, but mostly I talk about it in my head. She paused. Or with Gerald, but he's very bad at advice. Nadia almost smiled. Most Geralds are. Do you have a daughter? Lily asked. I do. Her name is June. She's 6. I'm 7, Lily said with dignity. Almost 8. Maybe June will meet you sometime, Nadia said. Lily considered this as her eyes fell further closed. She'd have to like horses, she said. I'll run it by her, Nadia said. She stood, set the book on the nightstand, and went downstairs to clean the kitchen. She scrubbed the countertops with the particular focus that cleaning takes when you're using it to think, the way physical work creates space in the mind, the way your hands can manage complexity while something else in you slowly metabolizes what you've seen and heard. She emptied and reloaded the dishwasher. She wiped the stovetop, which had the residue of several weeks of cooking done quickly and alone. She cleaned the inside of the microwave, which had the splatter record of a man eating without much ceremony. She found her way through the kitchen with the instinct she'd developed over years of this kind of work, not this specific job, but the accumulated practice of a woman who had learned to read the character of households the way other people read rooms, whose hands understood what they were touching. When she moved to the living room, she found the pink sneakers and put them in the wicker basket by the door where there were other shoes. She found the sippy cup and washed it properly and set it in the drying rack. She found a crayon drawing on the coffee table, folded in half. She opened it carefully and saw 2 figures in crayon, one tall and one small, both with enormous round heads and stick arms held outward in the wide gesture of people saying hello or celebrating, labeled in block letters so careful you could see the effort. Me and Daddy. She set it back on the coffee table exactly where she'd found it, refolded along the same crease. She moved the jacket from the banister and put it on a hook. She put the mail in a stack on the counter, sorted loosely by what looked like bills versus what looked like not. She opened a window in the living room because the house had the slightly sealed quality of a space where the windows hadn't been opened in a while. She was on her knees scrubbing the bathroom grout, which was not as bad as it looked and was mostly just in need of attention and a decent brush, when she heard Daniel's study door open and his footsteps in the hall. He appeared in the bathroom doorway and stopped. She sat back on her heels. He stood there, looking at the bathroom, the clean fixtures, the folded hand towels, the small organizational logic she'd imposed on the counter that had previously been a random accumulation of objects competing for space. He looked at it for a moment with that complicated expression that appears on people's faces when a space they'd stopped seeing suddenly appears to them again. You've been here 3 hours, he said. The kitchen was more involved than the outside suggested, she said. He moved his gaze from the bathroom to her face, as if he just remembered she was a person. Where's Lily? She was supposed to stay in her room. She is in her room, Nadia said. She's asleep. Something happened in his face, not quite relief but close to it, the physical sensation of something held too tightly briefly loosening. He turned his head slightly away, toward the wall, in the way men do when they're working on the muscles of their expression. She doesn't sleep well, he said, still partly turned away. Since January she hasn't. She wakes up a lot. Nightmares, I think, but she doesn't always say. I read to her, Nadia said, the horse book, Bramblewood. He went very still. Chapter 4, Nadia said. She had strong opinions about Windmere's jumping strategy. A long pause. He turned back and she could see he was managing something. I know that book, he said. He said it carefully, measuring each word. Nina read it to her. She'd been on chapter 4 for 2 weeks because she won't let me. I keep trying to get through the first page and I can't. Nadia pulled off her gloves. She sat on the edge of the tub, her knees hurt, and this was going to be a longer conversation than she'd planned. Same voice, she said. It wasn't quite a question. He looked at her. What? Your voice sounds too much like hers, close enough that it hurts instead of helping. He stood very still in the doorway for a long moment. Outside, the July heat pushed against the bathroom window. The neighborhood sounds came through it, a distant lawnmower, a dog, a car. Something like that, he said finally. She finished at 2:30. The house had that quality that clean spaces acquire in afternoon light, the look of rooms that have been returned to themselves, shaken out and properly settled. She carried her supplies to the front door and found Daniel in the kitchen with 2 mugs of coffee on the counter and the guilty look of a man who has done something he isn't sure he had the right to. "You don't have to," she started. "Please," he said. It came out more stripped of armor than he'd intended. He corrected course. "I made it. It'll go to waste otherwise." She sat at the kitchen table. He sat across from her. They drank coffee in the careful quiet of people who have recently said things to each other that neither had planned on. "Lily asked if you'd come back," he said, looking at the middle distance past her shoulder. "She mentioned she might. She doesn't connect with people easily since Nina." He turned his mug in his hands. "The counselor she's polite to, her teachers she's polite to, polite, present, technically fine. They all say she's doing well." He paused. "She's not doing well." "No," Nadia said, "she's not." He looked up. "You saw that in 20 minutes. "I heard it in about 30 seconds, Nadia said, "from the kitchen." His jaw tightened. Not at her, at the image she could see that. His daughter on the floor somewhere above him, crying in learned silence while he was on a work call. "I have a daughter," Nadia said. She wasn't sure why she was telling him this except that it felt like it needed to be said. "She's 6. Her father and I split 3 years ago, and for about 6 months after he left she went exactly that way. Very still, very fine, working very hard at fine." She looked at her mug. What helped her was other women, consistent other women, her aunt, my neighbor, women who just showed up in her life on a schedule and kept doing it. "You're offering something," he said. "I'm describing something that happened." She held his eyes. "I'm not here to fix your family, Mr. Reeves. I came to clean your house for $50. "Daniel," he said. "Daniel," she let the word land and settle. "But if Lily asked if I'd come back, I'd do this work. Cleaning, organizing, sometimes childcare when it's needed. I charge fair rates. Nothing complicated." He nodded, turned his mug in a slow circle on the table. "She hasn't said much about Nina to me, not directly. She says things around it at the edges." He looked up. "She talked to you about her mother?" "She told me her name," Nadia said. "What she did, that she was funny." He made a sound that was barely a sound. "She was very funny," he said. "She did these voices, characters. She had a whole cast of characters for different situations." He stopped, pressed his lips together. "I can't do the voices." "No one could do her voices," Nadia said. "That's not what Lily needs." He looked at her. "She needs someone who shows up," Nadia said, "and keeps showing up. That's the whole thing." She came back on Wednesday. She hadn't decided to, exactly. That wasn't quite how it happened. She'd been driving to another job across town, a big house in Riverside that paid triple what Daniel paid, and she'd taken the exit for Maplewood almost before she knew she was taking it. The way the body sometimes makes decisions, the mind is still catching up to. She'd called Daniel from the car, said she was in the neighborhood, asked if he needed anything. He said Lily had asked about her every day since Friday. She came back on Wednesday. She charged him a fair rate, fair being the rate that valued her time without considering what he could clearly afford, which appeared to be considerably more than she was charging. He didn't negotiate. He paid her without looking at the amount, which told her something about either his character or his financial situation, and after a few visits she concluded it was his character. Wednesdays became the shape of things. She moved through the house with the particular rhythm she'd developed over years, the efficient choreography of a person who has cleaned 1,000 spaces and learned to read each one. She put things away. She organized the counter by the door so that the mail had a place and the keys had a hook, and the small accumulated objects of daily life had homes to return to. She cleaned the kitchen floor on her knees with a brush because a mop misses things. She put fresh towels in the bathroom and changed the air freshener in the hallway because the old one had been there since before January, and it smelled like something that needed to be released. And she read to Lily. This happened every week, with the regularity of something Lily had quietly decided was a law. Whatever room Nadia was working in, at some point Lily materialized in the doorway, sometimes in school clothes, sometimes in pajamas depending on the hour, and she would sit on the floor nearby with Bramblewood, or eventually, when they finished it, its sequel, and she would read. Or Nadia would read to her. It shifted week to week. Sometimes Nadia read while Lily listened with Gerald clamped under her arm. Sometimes Lily read out loud with the slightly performative focus of a child who is showing off her reading skills for an audience she trusts. They finished Bramblewood. Windermere jumped all the fences eventually, and it was very satisfying. Lily cried at the ending, which surprised her, and then announced that she had not cried at the ending, which was a formality they both observed. They moved on to the sequel, which introduced a new horse named Caspian, who Lily approved of more than Nadia did, but they both agreed he was growing on them. Nadia brought June sometimes, on days when childcare fell through, or when she calculated that June needed a different afternoon than the one in front of her. The first two visits, Lily and June circled each other with the careful distance of children who have each been through enough to be selective. The third visit, something clicked, the specific, mysterious alchemy of childhood friendship, and afterward they were inseparable in the loud, argumentative, intensely creative way of children who have found someone whose imagination matches theirs in frequency. They turned the backyard into an elaborate fictional kingdom that had different names depending on the day. They argued about everything and agreed about most things. They built structures out of sticks that were always described as castles but looked more like accidents. Lily taught June about horses. June taught Lily about the elaborate social politics of first grade, which Lily, now in second, found both instructive and alarming. Daniel worked. This was the primary thing he did. He worked as though the hours of his life could be made into something solid if he processed enough of them through industry, as though productivity was a form of survival that he discovered and intended to use until he figured out another one. He was a structural engineer, or had been before his firm became something larger and more administrative. And now he managed things from the study, and sometimes Nadia could hear him through the closed door, talking in the precise, controlled voice of a professional who has kept his professional self functional, even while other parts have gone offline. But she noticed things. She noticed them week by week, the way you notice change in something you see regularly. The dishes were rinsed when she arrived now. Not washed. He hadn't got to washed, but rinsed. Someone had stood at the sink and done the preliminary work. The sneakers were sometimes in the basket. Once she arrived on a Wednesday and found a bouquet of sunflowers in a glass of water on the kitchen table, slightly wilted, the grocery store variety, the flowers you buy because something about the color catches you when you're in the checkout line on a hard morning. She asked him about them. Lily picked them out, he said, and then a beat later, I paid for them. High praise, Nadia said. She said the house looked like a waiting room. He said this with the slightly astonished tone of a father who has been informed of something accurate by his child. She said flowers would help. She's right, Nadia said, and put fresh water in the glass. By September, the house felt different. It felt like a house that was being lived in, which is not the same as a house that is being occupied. The difference is in the small details, the things on surfaces that are there because someone put them there on purpose, the light that comes through windows because someone opened them, the air that moves the way air moves in spaces where people have remembered to make room for it. Lily went back to school, third grade. She reported on it in the elaborate, high-velocity way she reported on everything. All the names and incidents and politics and small triumphs and injustices, and Daniel listened. That was the thing Nadia kept noticing about September. He was listening. Not just being in the room while Lily talked, but tracking it, following up, asking the right questions, present in the specific way that had been absent in July. She was driving Lily home one afternoon after school, one of the days she'd taken on more formally, picking up and dropping off on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and she caught Daniel's face in the rearview mirror as Lily described a conflict over a shared crayon in art class with the seriousness of a UN briefing. He was looking at the mirror, at the back of his daughter's head, with the expression of someone who had been somewhere far away for a long time and was, carefully, moving closer to home. He caught Nadia looking. In the rearview mirror, their eyes met for a beat. She looked back at the road. October came in cool and golden, and Lily was deeply invested in the falling leaves as a material for construction projects. June was over most Saturdays now, which had become an unofficial arrangement that nobody had formally proposed, but which had solidified through sheer repetition into something everyone treated as planned. One Saturday afternoon, Nadia was at the kitchen table, sorting Daniel's mail, the accumulation of a week's inattention, while the girls dismantled the backyard. She'd started doing this without being asked because the mail had been threatening to become a real problem, and she'd noticed the stack getting taller. She sorted bills from everything else, flagged 2 things that looked time-sensitive, put the rest in a pile that could wait. She was doing this when Daniel came through the back door 2 hours earlier than expected. He stopped in the kitchen and stood there for a moment, taking it in. The sorted mail, Nadia at his table, the noise from the yard, a Tuesday afternoon domesticity that was new and apparently surprising even to itself. "You're doing my mail," he said. "It was going to become a problem," she said. She did not apologize for it. He looked at the organized piles. He pulled open the refrigerator, stood in front of it for a moment, and took out 2 bottles of beer. He set one in front of her without asking. She picked it up. He sat down. They looked at the sorted mail. "I went to the cemetery this morning," he said to the table. Nadia didn't say anything. "She's buried in Morningside, the one on the east side. It's a good cemetery, trees." He turned the bottle in his hands. "I've been avoiding going since spring. Before that I went too much, I think, every couple of days. Patricia told me I had to find a different schedule." He paused. "This morning I found the schedule." "How was it?" Nadia asked. "It helped me understand that she was actually there," he said, "instead of everywhere." He lifted his chin toward the rest of the house. "Like distributed, everywhere at once and nowhere you could touch." Nadia held her beer in both hands. Outside she could hear Lily and June in the middle of what sounded like a structural disagreement about the castle. "I want to keep paying you," Daniel said. "But I also, what happens here isn't just a job anymore, and I'd feel dishonest pretending otherwise." "I know," she said. "You've done more for this house, for Lily, for me. You've done more than you were hired to do." He met her eyes. "I want to be clear that I see that, and I don't want it to be something you're doing just because you need the work." "I need the work," she said. "That's still true." She set the bottle down. "But I come on Wednesdays because I want to, not because I have to." He held her gaze. "There's a difference." "There is," she agreed. "I'd like to take you to dinner," he said. "Not as a with Lily too, as something that isn't a transaction." Outside, Lily shrieked. Then June shrieked, and then there was the unmistakable sound and impact of 2 children throwing themselves into a pile of leaves with maximum commitment. Nadia watched them through the window for a moment. "You should probably check that no one is bleeding," she said. He looked out the window. His face had that quality, the actual present attention. "They're fine," he said. "They're fine." And then he laughed. Actually laughed, a short, caught-off-guard sound, warm and real, the sound of a person discovering they still had that capability. He pressed a hand over his mouth like he'd surprised himself. Nadia looked at him. "There he is," she said quietly. He lowered his hand. He was still smiling, the kind that doesn't dissolve right away because it has nothing to perform for and everything to feel. "There who is," he said. "The person who was in there," she said, "behind all the other parts." He looked at her for a long moment. October light came through the window and made everything in the kitchen look like it had been thought about. "I thought he was gone," he said. "No," she said. "He just needed someone to open the windows." They had dinner that Friday. He chose a family restaurant, the kind with paper menus and crayons at the table, which Lily approved of strongly and June approved of with the full volume of her personality. He picked them up at her sister's apartment, and June answered the door and looked at him with the frank, unmediated assessment of a 6-year-old who has decided to be protective of her mother. "Are you the dad?" June asked. "I'm a dad," Daniel said carefully. "My daughter Lily is in the car." June processed this with visible effort. "Is this a date?" she asked. "June," Nadia said, from somewhere behind her. "My aunt says dates are when adults are deciding if they like each other," June said. "She says it like it's a crime, but I think it sounds okay." Daniel looked over June's head at Nadia with the helpless expression of a man who has been cornered by a 6-year-old and has no moves. "It's dinner," Nadia said, taking June's hand. "I like it when people like each other," June said decisively, and led the way to the car. Dinner was everything that a first dinner in a family restaurant can be: chaotic and loud, and completely impractical as a vehicle for elegant adult conversation, which meant it was exactly right. Lily and June ordered the same thing and immediately regretted it and traded half. Daniel demonstrated admirable patience during the process of explaining, 4 separate times, that the paper menu was both the menu and the activity, which June found either profound or confusing. Nadia ate a dish she hadn't ordered because June had ordered it by accident and maintained through considerable pressure that she had not. A glass of water was spilled. It was recovered from. At some point in the middle of it, in the middle of the negotiation, and the noise and the crayons, and the recovery from the water glass, and the ongoing hoarse debate between Lily and June, Nadia looked up and found Daniel watching her. Not the chaos. Her, the way you look at something that has become essential without announcing itself. She held it for a moment. Around them the restaurant continued. Families and noise and the indifferent warm life of a public place at dinner hour. And in the middle of it, something that had no name yet, but had the shape of a beginning. Patricia came for Thanksgiving. She moved through the changed house the way a woman moves when she's taking inventory of something she loves, slowly, with her hands on things, checking. The flower bed out front had been cleared and replanted. Lily had chosen the flowers with Nadia's guidance, which meant the choices were bold and not entirely conventional, but they were alive and they were intentional, which was more than could have been said in July. The hallway had Lily's drawings on it, framed, hung at Lily's eye height, her art at child level, as if the house itself had decided to see from that vantage point. The living room had 3 throw pillows and a new rug, and the particular feeling of a place that is inhabited rather than just occupied. On the kitchen table, Bramblewood sat with a bookmark nearly at the last chapter. Nadia had finished it with Lily the week before, but Lily had asked to put the bookmark back in the second-to-last chapter so that it would be there for Thanksgiving, so that Grandma Patricia would see it. Patricia stood at the table and put her hand on the cover. Nadia came in from the backyard with tea and found her standing there. "She gave him this book when Lily was born," Patricia said. "Nina. She said every family needed a horse book." She traced the cover. She had strong opinions about children's literature. Nadia set down the mugs. "I want to thank you," Patricia said. She turned around. "I've been trying to figure out how to say it since August, and I keep starting to be diplomatic and losing the thread, so I'm just going to say it." She looked at Nadia with the direct, unguarded expression of a woman who had loved people fiercely and had lost the most important one and was still standing. What you've done for Lily, what you've done for Daniel, I couldn't reach him. I've been trying since January, and I couldn't find a way in. He was very polite and very closed, and I kept arriving with all my grief attached to me, and I think he needed someone who wasn't broken by the same thing. Nadia looked at the window, at the yard, at Lily and June, building their current architectural project out of twigs and determination. Lily asked me if I'd come back, she said. That was the beginning of it. I know, Patricia looked at the yard too. She's laughing out there. She laughs all the time now, Nadia said. You should hear breakfast. Patricia pressed her lips together. She was doing the Patricia thing, the pulling herself together thing, the brisk, capable gesture that Daniel had clearly inherited in form if not in frequency. Nina would have liked you, she said finally. It was a significant thing to say. Nadia received it as such. She sounds like someone worth being liked by, Nadia said. Patricia looked at her. Something in her face softened, the tightness around the jaw that grief installs and that doesn't go away by will. It went away briefly for a moment. She was, she said. She was exactly that. That night after the girls were asleep and Patricia had taken her tea to the guest room and the dishes were done, Nadia and Daniel sat on the back porch. November had arrived in the air, real cold now, the kind that stays. He'd brought a blanket without being asked, and they each had half of it and coffee that was getting cold. I keep thinking about January, he said. The shape of that day, I replay it sometimes even when I'm not trying to. The hospital and driving home with Lily in the backseat, and she was asleep, and I kept thinking I had to find a way to say it to her, and I couldn't find any version that would work. Nadia didn't say anything, because some things you just hold with a person. I kept waiting to become someone who could handle it, he said. I thought if I worked enough, if I just kept moving, I thought there was a version of me on the other side of all those days that was going to be okay. He turned his mug in his hands. I got through the days, but the version of me on the other side, it wasn't something I grew into. It was something I grew toward. There's a difference. There is, Nadia said. You were part of what I was growing toward. He said it carefully, measuring it. You and Lily and June and the Wednesdays, the consistency of the Wednesdays. Nadia was quiet for a moment. The lights Lily had insisted on in September moved slightly in the wind, yellow and warm. Inside, the house breathed. There are things I need you to know, she said. About me. About June's father and the situation there and what that looks like practically, what I need from things. About the fact that I'm still figuring out a lot of it. There are things you need to know about me too, he said. About what grief does over time. I'm still in it. I'm further than January, but I'm still in it. I know that, she said. I've been watching. You've seen the managed version, he said. There's more underneath that you haven't seen yet. I know, she pulled the blanket a little closer. That's what's next if this goes anywhere. We see the underneath of each other. He turned toward her slightly in the porch chair. The yellow lights caught his face and he looked, she thought, like the man she'd been watching emerge since July, present, clear-eyed, aware of where he was. I want to try, he said, simply without decoration. She thought about the parking lot, the $11, the pharmacy receipt with the address on the back, the 3-line ad. $50, she said, was the best investment I ever made. His laugh again, that real, unhurried, genuine sound that she'd come to love precisely because it was rare and therefore couldn't be performed. He was still smiling when she said good night. She sat in her car for a moment before starting it. Through the front window of the house she could see him still on the porch, the shape of him in the yellow light, different than he'd been in July in some way she didn't have a single word for. Not smaller and not larger, just more himself, more fully arrived at wherever he was. She drove home through empty streets, past the pharmacy parking lot, and she thought about what it means to clean a house, not the surfaces but the thing underneath the surfaces, the permission you give a space to be itself again. She thought about how a house holds the shape of its people, takes on their grief and their joy and their habits and their hours, and how sometimes all it needs is one person moving through it with real attention, putting things back where they belong. She thought about Lily on the floor in the yellow room, knees to chest, horse book against the wall. She thought about how she'd sat down in the doorway, how she hadn't moved on. Sometimes that's the whole thing. Someone who doesn't move on. Someone who sits in the doorway and waits for the kid to look up. Someone who shows up on a schedule and keeps showing up, not because they were paid to start it, but because they chose to continue. The $50 was how it began. What it became was something nobody would have put in an ad. The thing about grief is that it has its own weather system, and it doesn't coordinate with anyone else's schedule. This was what Nadia learned over the months that followed, not as a theory but as a lived texture, the way you learn the personality of a house, room by room, season by season. Grief had its bad weeks and its functional weeks. It had its ambushes, the Tuesday in November when Daniel walked past the spice rack and found a small bottle of something Nina had bought, still half full, the label in her handwriting, and stood in the kitchen for 40 minutes unable to put it down or do anything with it except stand there. The afternoon in December when Lily's school did a family art project, and the other children drew their mothers, and Lily drew a woman with a hat who was described as Nadia, and the teacher called Daniel confused, and Lily explained with 7-year-old precision that she had 2 mothers now, one who was in the sky and one who came on Wednesdays, and that this was a factual statement, not a declaration. Daniel told Nadia about the phone call from the teacher, and she sat very still and tried to figure out what she was feeling, which turned out to be something too complicated and too large to name quickly, something that had several layers in it, warmth and seriousness, and a weight of responsibility, and underneath all of it, a kind of astonished gratitude that a child had looked at her and seen something worth drawing. "How did you respond?" she asked Daniel. "I told the teacher she was factually correct," he said. "Then I sat in my car for a while." Nadia looked at her hands. "You should have told me." "I'm telling you now," he said. "I didn't know how to tell you then. It felt like I didn't want you to feel pressured by what she said, by what she needed." "She drew me with a hat," Nadia said. "It was a very good hat," he said. "She spent a lot of time on it." There was a moment between them in which several things that had not been said yet were felt and turned over and gently set back down, not because they were unwelcome, but because they were delicate and deserved more time. "I don't feel pressured," she said. "I want you to know that." He nodded slowly. The kitchen was quiet around them. "She asked me last week if you were going to move in," he said. "I told her we hadn't discussed it. She told me that was a very slow decision for adults." He paused. "She said June's aunt says adults make things more complicated than they have to be." "June's aunt says a lot," Nadia said. "She does," he agreed. "But she's not always wrong." They were quiet for a moment, in the way they'd learned to be quiet together, the kind of quiet that isn't absence but presence, that doesn't need filling. "I'm not going anywhere," Nadia said. It wasn't a declaration of a specific intention. It was something more fundamental than that, a statement of orientation. "I face this direction. I intend to keep facing this direction." Daniel looked at her. His face did the thing it had stopped hiding, the thing underneath the management, the actual feeling, present and unperformed. "Neither am I," he said. December brought Patricia back, and with her came boxes from storage, things of Nina's that Patricia had been keeping until Daniel was ready for them, and which Lily had apparently told her grandmother by phone that they were ready for now. Nadia was there on the Saturday they arrived, not because she'd been asked, but because the girls wanted to spend the day together and Lily's house was where the tree was. The boxes contained ornaments, a whole collection of them, decades of Christmas ornaments that Nina had accumulated, the handmade kind, the glass kind, the slightly kitschy kind, the ones that had been given to her over years by people who loved her. Each one with a small piece of masking tape on the bottom with a date and sometimes a word. 1998, 2007 First Christmas Together, 2013 Baby. Lily sat on the living room floor and unwrapped each one with a focus and care that was something to see. She held each one up and announced it. She asked questions about the one she didn't know. Patricia answered, and sometimes Daniel answered, and sometimes neither of them could, and they just held the ornament and agreed it was beautiful. Nadia hung lights in the background and let the three of them do this without intruding. This was the other skill she had developed, the skill of knowing when to be in a room and when to be near a room, when her presence was needed, and when what was needed was the space she left by not taking up. But at one point Lily held up a small wooden horse, painted gray, with a red ribbon. She held it up and looked at it for a long moment. "Windmere," she said. Patricia looked at Daniel. He looked at the horse. "Mom got it the year before you were born," Patricia said. "She was reading a book about horses that winter. She said it felt right." Lily held the horse in both hands. She looked at it with the expression she got when she was deciding something important and wanted to get it right. Then she walked across the room to Nadia and held it out. "You should put this one on," Lily said. Nadia looked at the horse, then at Lily. "That's your mom's," she said. "I know," Lily said, "but you're the one who finished the book with me." She kept holding it out. "Mom would like it. She liked when people finished things." The room was very quiet. Outside, the first real snow of the season had started, and through the window it was coming down in the thick, soft way that early December snow comes slow and complete, covering everything gradually. Nadia took the wooden horse. She looked at it for a moment. The red ribbon, the careful gray paint, the small particular weight of something that had been loved. She crossed to the tree and found a branch near the center and hung it there. Lily watched her do it and then nodded once, with the satisfaction of someone who has correctly solved a problem. January came again, the anniversary. This was the one that had to be gotten through, the thing that everyone had been quietly tracking on the calendar even when they weren't admitting it. The first loop around the sun since Nina. The place where the year turned, and the year that had followed her absence could no longer be called new. Nadia asked Daniel in early December what would help. He said he didn't know. He said he thought he'd spend the morning at the cemetery and the afternoon with Lily doing something she chose. She said that sounded right and asked if he wanted company for either part. He said yes to both. They went to the cemetery in the cold. The four of them, Nadia, Daniel, Lily, and June, who had been told where they were going and had received the information with the serious gravity of a child who understands important things. There was a stone with Nina's name on it and the years and the word beloved, which was accurate without being sufficient, the way words on stones rarely manage to be sufficient. Lily put flowers at the base. She'd chosen them herself, the same kind of bold, slightly unconventional choices she made with the garden, but they were right. She stood there for a while and didn't say anything out loud, but her lips moved a little, the way they do when a person is having a private conversation. June stood next to Lily and held her hand without being asked. Nadia stood next to Daniel and watched the girls. She would have liked June, he said quietly. They would have had opinions, Nadia agreed. He made a sound that was the ghost of a laugh. Nina had opinions about everything. She was relentless about it. She thought that was the thing, opinions, well held and well defended. She thought most people gave up their opinions too easily. A pause. She would have wanted Lily to be this. To be what? This. He nodded toward the two girls, hand in hand in the snow, Lily talking quietly and June listening. To have people. Nadia looked at the stone. Nina Reeves, a woman who had been funny and had made voices and had strong opinions about children's literature, and had, apparently, bought a wooden horse ornament in the year before her daughter was born because it felt right. She does have people, Nadia said. She has plenty. After the cemetery, they went to a diner and ordered the biggest breakfasts on the menu, which had been Lily's choice, and turned out to be exactly right. The specific restorative power of too much food in a warm place after cold and grief. They ate and talked, and June explained to Lily the plot of a book she'd been reading and got several plot points wrong, and Lily corrected them. And June argued with the corrections, and Nadia and Daniel looked at each other across the booth with the mutual recognition of two adults in the presence of something good. Outside, January was doing its January thing, white and permanent and indifferent. But inside the diner, everything was warm. Nadia poured syrup with a generous hand and thought about $50 and a pharmacy parking lot and a 3-line ad with no photo and the door that had looked like a dead end. She thought about how she'd sat down in the doorway, how she hadn't moved on. All of this, she thought, all of this from sitting down in a doorway. June was now explaining loudly that horses and unicorns were technically the same if you thought about it. And Lily was explaining, with equal volume and superior evidence, why this was incorrect. And Daniel was watching his daughter argue with the confidence of someone who has something worth arguing about. And his face was the face of a man who had found his way back to himself from a very long way away. He looked up and caught Nadia looking. She didn't look away this time. "Thank you," he said quietly under the noise of the girls. "For what?" "For the $50, he said, "for coming." She looked at him. "You paid me," she said. "For coming back," he said, "for sitting down in the doorway." He held her gaze, for not moving on. The girls were still arguing. The diner was warm. January pressed against the windows and didn't get in. Nadia reached across the table and put her hand over his. Neither of them said anything else. There wasn't anything else that needed to be said. Some things begin with a transaction and become something that has no price on it. Some things that look like dead ends are the exact place you needed to arrive. Some houses need one person to move through them with real attention, and the houses don't forget, and neither do the people inside them. She came for $50. She stayed because some doors, once you've opened them, you don't want to close again. And the little girl who sat on the floor crying quietly in a yellow room with a horse book. She's 8 now, nearly 9, and she laughs at breakfast, and she has people, and she has a wooden horse on the tree every December, and she knows her mother's name was Nina, and she knows her mother was funny, and she knows the world held both of these true at once. That someone beloved is gone, and that someone new has arrived, and that there is enough room in a house and a heart for both of these to be completely, permanently, stubbornly true. That's what Nadia came to understand, scrubbing that bathroom floor, reading that horse book, making that grilled cheese that was better than restaurants. That a house is just walls until someone decides it's a home. And someone decided.